We open with exciting news from Tony. He just had a celebrity fair. It was Hervé Villechaize.
Who?
Which means mostly nothing to anyone who didn't live through this time, which is me. But Hervé Villechaize was the little person who was famously on Fantasy Island, which is a TV show that I have never seen an episode of, but I have seen it parodied many times. Also, if you're a South Park watcher, the new episodes with JD Vance in them, this is who JD Vance is modeled after. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Taxi. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm just going to give you a brief agenda here. We start with the potent notables, which are just a couple interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the episode or series. Then I go into the episode overview, which is where I talk about everything that happened in the episode, so spoiler alert. Then I do the rank, which is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today we're going to be ranking the 23rd episode of the second season of Taxi, titled A Fantasy Borough, Part 1. Written by Barry Kemp and directed by Jimmy Burrows. All right, let's dive in here and see how it stacks up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So this 45th episode of Taxi was released on Tuesday, May 6th, 1980. Taxi was the 13th highest rated show for the entire season, with an average rating of a 22.4, so not too shabby. Now for my other potent notable here, so apparently the song that Bobby's singing in this episode is actually from Jeff Conaway's self-titled LP that was released in 1979. Now, I couldn't find it to listen to it. I did eventually find it on YouTube, but I didn't listen to it before the episode, so I heard it there. I don't need to hear any more of it. Now, if there is anyone out there that has heard this record, this entire album, please comment and tell me how incredible it is. I mean, the cover art is amazing. He's wearing a rain slicker or something and carrying an umbrella, and his mouth is just like open while he stares at the camera. I have to know how bad these songs are, or shockingly good. I don't actually want to find out for myself, so you guys just tell me, please. Anyway, those are the potent notables, so let's go on to the episode overview. We open with exciting news from Tony. He just had a celebrity fair. It was Hervé Villechaize.
Who?
Which means mostly nothing to anyone who didn't live through this time, which is me. But Hervé Villechaize was the little person who was famously on Fantasy Island, which is a TV show that I have never seen an episode of, but I have seen it parodied many times. Also, if you're a South Park watcher, the new episodes with JD Vance in them, this is who JD Vance is modeled after. Anyway, everyone's excited about this news, and Louis comes out of his cage to be like, hey, I do an impression of this guy. So he does this impression in spite of everybody telling them that they don't want him to. And I have to say, it is not lost on me that they had Danny DeVito do an impersonation of a little person. But Locke is going to come over and ask what the commotion is. They're like, you probably don't know Fantasy Island because in your country, they probably don't get first run shows. You get all the old stuff, so you're like years behind us. And Locke confirms this by saying that their favorite shows in his country are The Honeymooners, which is like decades older than this, and I Nick Lucy, which is, Caspian for love, I guess. I mean, we've heard him say Nick in previous episodes, and usually that meant sex, so I guess in his homeland, it's I sex Lucy. But this is going to lead directly to everyone in the garage answering the question, what's their fantasy? We start with Tony, and everyone just assumes that he's going to fantasize about being middleweight champion boxer. I mean, that seems reasonable to me, but Tony's like, hey, you guys just all think I'm just a dumb boxer. And Louis like, I don't think that. I think you're a bad boxer. And a dumb person. But we're going to see Tony's fantasy, and it's that smart people recognize him as smart as well. And it's actually a really funny scene with Eric Severide becoming a fare in his cab, who I don't know who that is, but I'm guessing he's somebody who's intelligent. And he's in the cab because he's going to the GOSG, which is the gathering of smart guys. So in this ride, Tony's going to ruminate about world leaders and how instead of having wars, they could just fight each other, and how the White House should throw parties for poor people and give them food instead of throwing rich people banquets, and that would solve world hunger. And Eric Severide's like, whoa, Tony, you're going too fast for me. Like, this is blowing my mind. You could definitely join us at the gathering of smart guys, because you just have to say something smart when you get to the door, and either of those things you just said would be smart enough to get you in. So this is all really fun, silly, and engaging stuff. But next we're going to get Locke's fantasy. And it's going to come right after Louis is being just a gigantic dick to him and yelling at him to get back to work. So this sets up Laka's fantasy of basically him and Louis switching places. Also, we can see from this fantasy how Laka seems to view how everybody views Louis, which I thought was kind of a nice touch because, at least from this perspective, it sure seems like Laka thinks that everybody respects Louis. Because in this fantasy, everyone's super respectful to Laka in the same role. And maybe I'm reading too much into that. It doesn't really matter though, because this fantasy sequence of Laka's is the best of the episode. So Laka's gonna end up using that same PA system that Louis always uses. He's gonna get on and be like, okay, losers. You know, it's what Louis says. I liked it. And then Louis is gonna come down from the second floor dressed as the mechanic. And Laka is gonna berate Louis for not getting his work done. Louis is gonna be like, hey man, I was just in the bathroom, sorry. And Laka's like, the bathroom? You went to the bathroom yesterday. And then Louis tells this sob story about how his mom is in the hospital or whatever. And Laka's like, so you have no excuse. You know what this means. And then Elaine comes over and puts a blindfold on Louis, and a bunch of guys with guns come out. It's meant to represent a firing squad, so the punishment for this apparently is that Louis is going to be killed. But before we see that happen, Laka's going to be pulled out of this reverie by Louis yelling at him again. You know, get off your butt and get to work, right? And as Louis turns around, he's walking away, we see Laka close his eyes again, and we just hear him sort of under his breath say, fire. So, like I said, I thought that was the best bit. After that happens, Hervé is going to call the garage, ask for Tony, and be like, hey, I'm going to come and pick up the pictures that I accidentally left in your cab, which I didn't mention earlier, but it doesn't really matter. It's the point of the episode is the fantasies, not the fact that Hervé is going to show up at the end. But everyone's excited to meet him, which is going to lead to Bobby's fantasy. Now, I have to say, Tony's like on the phone with Hervé, and Bobby is like not trying to get an in with him, which I feel like he would have been more interested. But either way, all of them are going to assume that Bobby's fantasy is to become a famous actor, and he's like, hey, that's not my only dream. I have other dreams. And it turns out his other dream is to be a famous singer. I just cannot believe that the song that was playing was from Jeff Conaway's actual single. He had a single, and he was ridiculously lip syncing his single on the TV in the bar of this episode. I don't know, that just struck me as funny. Anyway, Louis is watching it, and he's like, hey, I knew him. Of course, nobody believes him because he looks like a down-and-out bum. But Louis is going to get the opportunity to redeem himself because Bobby inexplicably shows up at the bar. He wants to see his roots again, I guess. And Louis like, Bobby, tell him that you know me. So Bobby pulls Louis to the side and he's like, hey, you know the deal. You got to give me $1 for me to say that. So Louis reluctantly gives him his last dollar, saying, but it's my last dollar. How am I going to eat? And Bobby doesn't give a shit. Give me the $1. And then after getting the last dollar that Louis has, he ends up going up to all the people and being like, yeah, I've never seen him before in my life. It was a good bit, but I could have done without Jeff Conaway's entire single playing for this entire scene. But, you know, I get it. And next, when we come back, we're going to get Jim's fantasy. And this one is really bizarre. In a way that works for Jim, but sadly just wasn't super funny. Basically, Jim says his fantasy is that he wants to travel, and in this fantasy of traveling, he's sort of just sitting on his couch, which is cute, but then an alien spacecraft shows up and convinces him to board. He does board, and he goes to another world. That's basically it. I thought it was kind of disappointing. I was looking forward to his fantasy. But when that fantasy is over, Hervé is going to show up at the garage and be nice to all the starstruck cabbies. Of course, Louis is going to insist on doing his impression of Hervé in front of Hervé, who then acts like he likes it, but obviously doesn't, and then tells the cabbies to tell Louis that it was shitty. Feels like he could have just said it to him. Now, I don't want to hit him too hard here, and I don't know what he was like on Fantasy Island, because like I said, I've never seen an episode of it, but wow, was he not good on Taxi. But that's the whole episode. Let's find out how it ranked.
Oh, wait.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. There's really not a story here, right? I mean, Tony has a celebrity fair that is Hervé Villechaize, which makes them fantasize about different things. All of the things were interesting and engaging, but not super funny. And I don't want to bash it for story, because I did enjoy the episode, but there's really just not a story here. The only arc of the episode is getting Villechaize's pictures back to him. So I gave it a 2. So that brings us to acting, and the acting was fine. I didn't have any issue with the main cast. They were a bit overacting in their fantasies, but I understood that. It was kind of the point. Honestly, the standout in regards to it not being good was the guest star, Hervé Villechaize. He just wasn't good at all. Everything else was good though, so I gave it a 4. So that brings us to dialogue. And it's not that the dialogue was bad, it just wasn't very funny. I was engaged the whole time and found it amusing, but nothing really made me laugh. And considering that this is a sitcom, I can't give it high marks if it doesn't make me laugh. So I went with a 2.5. That brings us to episode coherence. And this is where the episode shines because it coheres to the characters that we've come to know. And since there isn't really a story here to cohere to, it just has to have everyone have coherent fantasies. And they do. So I gave it a 5. So that brings us to character relatability. Banta feels dumb and fantasizes about being smart. Louis thinks he's got a good impression and is too full of himself to realize that he doesn't. Jim fantasizes about being taken off planet by a spaceship of aliens. Bobby fantasizes about being a famous singer instead of actor. And Laka fantasizes about being the boss. I thought it all worked and was relatable. I mean, who doesn't relate to fantasizing about what their lives could have been or could be? So I gave it a 5. Now that brings us to the laugh counter, and I think because I knew that I didn't laugh much in this episode, I might have graded it on a curve a little bit because it was really going to need a lot of help here because it only got me 4 times. So unfortunately, that means the grand total is at a 22.5, which puts it at rank it and regret it. But as for the series average, it drops it a little bit to a 26.3, which keeps it as mediocre. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your scores into the comments. I am super curious to find out if my laugh counter was as low as everybody else's. Am I just like a grouch or something? I feel like I'm easy to make laugh, so I don't understand why it doesn't get me more than it does. But, maybe I could get some validation here. Anyway, thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Taxi episodes on this channel or any of my other sitcom or movie episodes. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. You can check out up-to-date rankings on the website at therankpodcast.com, or you can email me at john@therankpodcast.com. Also, if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I will leave you with this. Ludacris was inspired to write a song based on an outtake of this episode. In the outtake, Bobby stutters through a line reading to Tony, where he wants to know what's his fantasy.
Shit. Please don't do that again.
That's so not worth it. Where he wants to know what was shit.
Cut!
Where he what wants to no.
Cut!
Where he shit. This is the end clip here, isn't it?
Oh, you know it.